You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hello and welcome to the Catholic Mama Podcast. I'm your host, Christine Mooney Flynn, and as it is Sunday, we also have...
the husband just waking up.
Yeah, we are podcasting early this morning because we thought that if we got up early and started podcasting, that we could do it before the kids woke up. Well, joke's on us. It's 6:15, and the baby woke up with my 4 a.m. alarm, and now is down for a nap. So now we're podcasting at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Here we are.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone, and get ready for an unpleasant episode.
Right before we hit record, I said, ready for Pat Flynn to get wound up.
Yep.
So, you made a good point early this week in saying that you had gone out after this social media stuff that was going on. We'll explain this in a second. But you went out, I think, to grab lunch, and you said, the world is normal. People are nice. They're out and about. They're enjoying the sunshine. Life is not social media. We'll explain this in a second. But you went out, I think, to grab lunch, and you said, the world is normal. People are nice. They're out and about. They're enjoying the sunshine. Life is not social media.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But it's that loud minority that is shrieking on social media or out in the streets that's causing a lot of havoc and needs to be stopped before it squashes the silent majority.
Correct.
And so earlier this week, this shows I'm just so pure heart.
Just purity itself.
Right. I asked others to join me in a novena praying for in reparation for the destruction of sacred icons.
That's right.
So
desecration.
Yes, the desecration of sacred icons, such as the Black Madonna statue or mosaic in Europe that had been desecrated with BLM on there. Because of the current climate that we're in.
Correct, and we said this on the Facebook Live, Instagram, whatever it is. Get the social medias mixed up.
They're all the same.
The thingy. That, as Catholics, we are committed to condemning these acts. And we'll talk about the whole whataboutism and the prayer police out there about how if you pray for one thing, you must inherently be promoting some other evil secretly in your small little black heart. We'll talk about that. But for Catholics, the Church has always taught that desecration of sacred icons is sacrilege. It is physical sacrilege. Whereas blasphemy is verbal sacrilege. So it's sacrilege. It is a serious sin. And what's going on here for Catholics, obviously if you're Protestants, it is actually interesting to see Protestants getting upset about this. It seems like they forgot their whole history of destroying icons. Yeah. But I'm actually happy that they're on our side now. But for Catholics who are faithful to the Church and what the Church teaches, this is not a matter of just the destruction of private or public property.
It's not just a statue.
Right. There is deep religious significance here that ties into a matter of justice of what is owed to God and what the Church formally teaches. So I think it's just important that Catholics have clarity on what the Church's position is on this, and that it's not just a matter of destruction of private or public property. We're talking about the sin of sacrilege here. This is serious business.
Yeah. And so I went to the Catechism just to see what they had to say about sacred icons. And in paragraph 1160, these icons express in images the same gospel message that Scripture communicates by words. Image and word illuminate each other. Mm-hmm. So just because it's a picture or a statue doesn't make it any less meaningful. I mean, we would be so upset if people were burning Bibles. This is the same. This is on par. And I love it. And, the inverse is true, I believe. In paragraph 2132, it says, whoever image venerates the person portrayed in it. Whoever desecrates an image desecrates the person portrayed in it. I mean, we can clearly see the inverse of that working.
Right.
And that is a problem.
Yeah. So just some...
And we'll get into more of this.
Yeah. So anyways.
So anyway, I called for this novena, inviting people very nicely to come join me, because I thought, that's one thing we can all get behind is people disrespecting God.
Turns
out I was praying wrongly, as I was told via private messages and very public comments attacking my character. I got mobbed.
Yeah, you got your first online SJW, your first serious online SJW.
Yeah, because I've done
mob
pro-life
attack,
stuff, and you get like occasional people, but I never really got mobbed from the pro-life. This was the first.
Yeah. Now
And it was mostly Catholics who did that.
Well, yes, a very interesting type of Catholics, and we'll discuss my empirical findings here in a minute. But let me just say how unfortunate this is. Let me just say how annoying this is as I continue to wake up here and work myself into a fever.
I can see it, folks. He's gripping the table.
I love talking about philosophy and theology, talking about the great truths and mysteries of the faith. I hate that we even have to do a podcast on this. This is so stupid. And so
I know,
annoying.
we were supposed to be talking about sexual ethics today.
Right. We're supposed to continue on with traditional natural law, the beautiful teaching of the moral law through the Catholic Church's magisterium, like really good, beautiful, interesting stuff. And now here we are dealing with how to defend yourself. We are going to give practical tips on this episode. How to defend yourself against the online bullies, the people who engage in half-sincere lip service, prayer policing, which is the I'm going to coin that term, prayer policing, because you're only allowed to pray a certain way according to these people. Mm-hmm. Other terms, the virtue signaling mob, the SJWs, all of it. We're going to talk about how to defend yourself from this and where they come from, how to identify them, and why they are wrong. But it's unfortunate. Like, I don't actually really enjoy talking about this stuff, but as has been clearly attested by your page and your followers. And this is important to understand, is most people are disgusted by this mob, but they don't want to deal with it. So that's why you got 1 million private messages from people, but very few people coming out publicly to stand against this.
Right, except for you. Thank you. I'll and Levi and Alex came to your assistance.
And not that you needed it, but it's important that these bullies be beaten back, because it's middle school. It's all middle school bully tactics. And once you understand that, it's annoying, but it's not that hard to deal with. And it's also important to recognize that there's always a certain playbook, right? There's always a certain structure that these types of things follow. And once you understand the structure, it's very predictable. You will be called names. That these types of things follow. And once you understand the structure, it's very predictable. You will be called names. They'll engage in all sorts of feigned language of charity. So one of my favorites was all the people commenting about how they just wished to reach your heart and hope that you would see things and change. And then we would call them out, be like, "Wow, this is obscenely condescending." And they'd be like, "Well, I didn't mean to say that you're a bad person. I just wanted to pray that God would change fundamentally everything about yourself. I didn't say that you were bad. I just thought that you have a small, cold, black, hard heart.
Yeah,
is all that I just really wish that it would change." It's just like, what are you going on about? Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself.
That's all right. Yeah, and especially I love the. I got one or two private messages from people who came out screeching at me and saying that I'm a horrible person because I want to ask God for forgiveness for people who are desecrating. It's like, I'm sorry you feel like I was being uncharitable. No, you were being uncharitable. You're being a real jerk and publicly condemning me when I just asked, let's pray together for asking God. And it wasn't, I just said, people are dishonoring God. That's a problem. And if you look at you got to that chair is so squeaky.
I know. I will not move for the rest of the podcast. I'll try to.
I'll get some WD-40. Mm-hmm. When you look at the two greatest commandments that God gave us in chapter 22 of the book of Matthew, the first one is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind. And the second one is to love each other as you love yourself. Now, the first one, he says, is the first and greatest commandment. If we can't get that one right, why the heck do people think we can even start on the second? You've got to start with that first. And if you start dishonoring God, of course, you're not going to be able to follow through. And because the only reason that we have respect and love is because of that first commandment in the first place, because of God himself.
Correct.
You've got to start with that first. And if you start dishonoring God, of course, you're not going to be able to follow through. And because the only reason that we have respect and love is because of that first commandment in the first place, because of God himself.
Correct.
We couldn't have anything else. Right. If it wasn't for that. Now, of course, the people who are desecrating these icons are not God-fearing people anyway. Right. There's a Marxist agenda in there that we'll talk about. But you've got something pulled up on your phone. So why don't you?
All right, let's get right to the heart of the matter. What was the accusation? Well, the accusation was that since you weren't praying for racism and police brutality, and you were praying for the desecration of sacred icons, there were many accusations. One is that
I actually stopped reading them after a while.
Is that you don't care about the destruction of innocent life, or that you don't care about racism or systemic racism in the police force or any of this. So, what is wrong with all of this? Well, what is wrong with all of this is like it's what I call a fallacy smoothie. It's like a blend of different fallacies. One, it's an ad hominem, it's an attack against your character. It's an argument from silence. Most of these people weren't at that moment talking about or condemning child sex slavery. Are we to infer that they are in support of that? It's just and the fallacy of whataboutism, right? Where this is a really funny one. And whataboutism is a fallacy where somebody's trying to raise a specific issue that deserves attention for whatever reason, and rather than somebody addressing that issue directly or addressing the argument which is trying to advance that issue, they say, well, what about this or what about that? And it's a fallacy of diversion. And you see it in the pro-life argument all the time, where people will bring up some issue about abortion and somebody will say, well, what about children in need of adoption? Do you not care about the lives of innocent children? And it's funny because or you hear it with the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Where they say, where somebody will say all lives matter. And I've said that I think that saying all lives matter is kind of a silly retort, because it's the same type of fallacy. Somebody's trying to bring up a fallacy. I don't think that is a good response. I think there's a million other reasons to criticize the Black Lives Matter movement, specifically the Black Lives Matter organization, which we're going to get into, but don't fall for these same dumb fallacies. And the funny thing is people can pick this fallacy out fairly well when somebody else is making it, but they almost never detect when they're making it themselves. Yeah,
I've definitely done it.
Which is exactly what is being used against you. So you have arguments from silence. You have false choice dilemmas set up. You have whataboutism. Just all of these coming in and direct ad hominem attacks. Now, obviously, it is compatible to both be strongly against racism and injustice, and also strongly against the desecration of sacred icons. And in fact, you would be a fool not to be. And Catholics have to care about justice universally. We can't care about justice only when it is convenient or politically correct. And that's really the issue that's going on universally. We can't care about justice only when it is convenient or politically correct. And that's really the issue that's going on here, that people were upset because you haven't stepped in to their mainstream rhetorical structure, which really is the Black Lives Matter organization and movement. That's really what is the issue, is because you didn't put the little black box up and you aren't affirming this organization. They are outraged. And this is how the mob works. Whenever somebody breaks the narrative or steps out of the rhetorical structure, the first thing is to point and shriek, which is what we saw. There's a lot of pointing, a lot of shrieking about praying for the desecration of, think about what these insane people are shrieking at, right? Yeah. Prayers to God, asking for the forgiveness of a serious sin, which the Catholic Church teaches is a serious sin. Then there is lying, there's doubling down, and there's projection. Always. There's lying, there's doubling down, there's projection. There's lying about your character. There's doubling down when people are called out on this. Oh, well, I didn't say that you're a bad person. Like I said, I just hope that you would fundamentally change everything about yourself, right? And then there's, of course, projection. There's something in them that they're pushing out onto you, right? Whatever that is. But there's always lying, doubling down, and projection. So pointing and shrieking, lying, doubling down, projection as well. Now, before we go on, I think maybe we should make it clear of why we don't support the Black Lives Matter organization. I agree. People have pointed this out before, and it's not the most fun conversation to have, but I think it's one worth having, so that way we can move forward with the other important aspects of this conversation. So the baby's waking up, so I'm just gonna keep going. All right. So what's wrong with the Black Lives Matter organization? Well, if you've been following them for more than 5 minutes, if you've taken any interest in their leadership, how they originated, and what their policies are and their website, I think you would have to be insane, absolutely insane, to support this organization. And what the Black Lives Matter organization is your classic Mott and Bailey bait and switch Trojan horse political agenda being rammed through some slogan that, yes, every sane honest, decent person is going to care about, like the proposition Black Lives Matter. Of course, everybody must and should affirm the proposition that Black Lives Matter. But what I don't affirm are all the other agendas and policies that the Black Lives Matter organization is trying to ram through. On their website, they talk about of their avowed destruction of the nuclear family unit, promoting or destroying heteronormativity, promoting radical gender ideology. Not only do these things have nothing to do with the inherent dignity of Black lives or improving the welfare of Black Americans and Black civilians, I would argue they're positively harmful to that. They're positively athwart that. We know how destructive growing up in a household without a father is, right? Growing up in broken house without a father is, right? Growing up in broken households are, especially for all minority communities, but also whites as well, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is that they lie. They lie about systemic racism. They lie that systemic racism is a huge issue in policing or the criminal justice system. Not only is it not a huge issue, the best evidence that we have shows that it positively isn't an issue. Right? The best studies and evidence we have show that this is not a thing. So they're whipping people into a fever, like I'm whipping myself into a fever, over a lie that is slandering cops, that's causing massive civil unrest, that's causing the destruction of further innocent lives, which we also pointed out. Right? What about the lives that have been lost, Black lives, because of these riots? That's causing massive, like I said, societal upheaval, and people are just getting into this insane mob mentality, and they cannot think. So let me just go through a couple of facts, and these are the facts that everybody should be aware of before making gross appeals to emotion, like people on social media, or slandering a person's name for their refusal to join lockstep into your hot mess political narrative. And so this is specific to the claim of systemic racism in policing. And this is where statistics become relevant. We got to move beyond anecdotes. Experience, personal experience, like lived experience, as people say, that stupid line, lived experience, makes terrible policy. Personal experience, anecdotes can motivate us. They can encourage us to look into things, but you don't use, the exceptions to make the rules. Here's a fact. This is a study that came out recently from Michigan State University and published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science in 2019, found that Black civilians are no more likely to be killed by white cops of the National Academy of Science in 2019. I encourage everybody to check it out. Another study in 2018 came to similar conclusions. We'll link these in the show notes for people who want to find that, right? Furthermore, here's another fact. Black officers have been found more likely to shoot and kill Black civilians than white officers. That comes from the Philadelphia Justice Department study and survey in 2015. Now, why would that be the case? There's two good explanations for this, actually. One is that, again, it's related to crime. The disparities are related to crime, but also that cops are frequently pulled from the population that they typically police. And we know statistically, unfortunately, that the Black population is disproportionately represented in the amount of crime committed in America. So it makes sense when you fix for crime that you would see disparities and disproportionate representation in encounters and specifically fatal encounters with the police. Here's another fact. Crime that you would see disparities and disproportionate representation in encounters and specifically fatal encounters with the police. Here's another fact. In 2019, officers fatally shot 1,009 people, most of whom were armed or dangerous. 9 of those people were unarmed Black civilians, where 19 were unarmed white civilians. In 2018, 7,407 Black civilians were killed by homicide. 7,407 Black civilians were killed by homicide. That means that the number of Black unarmed civilians killed by cops to the overall number of Black civilians killed by homicide is less than 0.1% of all Black killings. And this isn't even factoring in abortion. Let that be known. And we'll link the sources to this as well in the show notes. This isn't even So whatever you want to call a systemic issue, that's a large debate in philosophy, but it's certainly got to be more than a fraction of a percent. And this isn't even considering that there are around 375 million contacts with the police every year between civilians. So not only is systemic racism not found in fatal incidences with the police, but the charge of police brutality itself is largely exaggerated, if not unfounded. So when a movement is promoting the slandering of police, it's leading to police being. By the way, here's another statistic: a black cop is 18 times more likely to be killed by a civilian than a civilian is likely to be killed by a black cop. So that's another rel. What about the lives of those officers? What about the lives of those black cops? And just to be clear, we're not engaging in the whataboutism here, because this is all related to Black Lives Matter. If you really believe that Black Lives Matter, that is true. That is a real disparity. It's a structural inequality. But you can't blame the police for that. The police are the response to that. They're not the ones who set the systems or the structures in place or the culture or anything that's led to that. So wanting to defund and get rid of the police, wanting to put people's lives at risk, wanting to slander people's good names, all of this is evil. It's evil. And if Catholics aren't standing against this, then you don't care about justice. You're just hopping in to whatever is convenient, whatever is expedient, whatever is politically correct. What should be, do you mind if I keep going?
No, please do. I'm fascinated.
So rather than continue whipping people into a frenzy over a statistical non-issue, here's what you should be doing. Here's what all these cyber banshees online should be doing. One, you should condemn any individual acts of police brutality, whether they're racially motivated or otherwise, and hold those offenders accountable and bring them to justice. So, of course, what happened to George Floyd was an egregious moral acts of police brutality, whether they're racially motivated or otherwise, and hold those offenders accountable and bring them to justice. So, of course, what happened to George Floyd was an egregious moral catastrophe. Everybody agreed with that. I didn't notice one person who thought that George Floyd did not deserve justice. But you don't extrapolate from that, right? And act like this is the norm in policing. It's not. It's not even close to the norm. So, yes, you condemn any acts of injustice without ignoring the cumulative weight of evidence and condemning police officers outright. That would be one thing to keep in mind. Number two is we need to have discussions on what the cultural and systemic issues actually are, resulting in higher crime and more contact with the police among black communities. Clearly, police are not responsible for those policies, or at least not all of them, or even most of them. Politicians are, right? That would be another point. And third point would be this. Stop, and this is relevant to you, stop automatically attributing malicious motives to fellow human beings before just making unwarranted personal attacks to somebody online. This is basic second-grade social skills. Finally, understand that it is reasonable and just to condemn horrific acts, such as the further innocent loss of lives, the destruction of people's livelihoods, and desecration of sacred icons, which has all come out of this Black Lives Matter movement. All that has happened. Yep. More lives have been lost. Incredible amounts of vandalism. There's been rape. There's been the desecration of sacred icons. So it is reasonable just to condemn those horrific acts resulting from a frenzied reaction to a previous injustice. And there was a massive previous injustice. And in doing so, that no way belittles the previous injustice. It no way belittles what happened to George Floyd or the appropriate responses that have been given to it. It no way belittles the people who have really asked and sought justice in an appropriate way. For Catholics, justice is to be sought universally, not just when it is convenient, not just when it is politically asked and sought justice in an appropriate way. For Catholics, justice is to be sought universally, not just when it is convenient, not just when it is politically correct. And it is easy to step in on the social media mob mentality. It's easy to put up that little black box. What's tough is to say, no, this has gone too far, or it's gone in the wrong direction. This is not true. What's happening here is a bait and switch, Mott and Bailey tactic. You see it all the time in politics, where somebody tries to push a really controversial position, which Black Lives Matter does, a radical, Marxist, postmodernist position. And then when they're challenged on that position, as they rightfully should be, they retreat back to a less controversial position and say, well, don't you think Black Lives Matter? That's the Mott and Bailey tactic. Let's take another example. Say there's a controversial war going on. You say, I think this war might be unjust. Somebody might then retreat back and say, well, don't you support the troops?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's the same dumb thing, and people need to get over it. Don't fall for it. You don't even have to dignify those accusations with comment. They're so false, they're so ridiculous, and they're so malicious. But hopefully that's some decent starting reasons of why Catholics should always affirm the proposition that Black Lives Matter. And, we haven't even gotten to abortion yet. Like, you want to talk about real systemic inequality, real, quantifiable, right? If you want to talk about a structural institution that has deeply bigoted roots, Margaret Sanger and her horrific positions against the disabled, the feeble-minded, et cetera, which have and the lower classes, which today have quantifiable disproportionate structural effects on minority communities, specifically Black communities. Where is the public condemnation there? Why aren't we tearing down everything related to Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood? Because that's where we can find data to actually show this, right? This is the funny thing about how the term racism is used, is there's equivocation going on. So in a lot of this sort of critical race theory ideology, you could have a country that's systemically racist with no individual racists. Now, isn't that interesting? What does that mean? It means they're using the term racism but with different concepts, right? The term is pointing to different concepts. It's equivocation. Racism, traditionally understood, is the belief that there's some sort of moral difference or moral value gap between people because of their skin color. Like, somebody is worth less, has less dignity because of their skin color. It's a fallacy of accident, right? It's confusing a property about somebody that is really contingent, that doesn't matter, could be otherwise, and in no way affects what they essentially are. Which is, of course, we are rational animals, dependent rational animals, and we have value based on what we are as our nature as rational animals, not on the color of our skin, not on our performance in height, our size, location, level of development, any of that, right? So it's actually eerily similar to see how often a justification for abortion is brought up that parallels almost identically how people used to justify slavery, denial of personhood, trying to push property rights over life rights, all that. Where is the outrage there?
Well, you look at it.
I was about to say a vulgarity, but I'm refraining myself.
Well, that was the kind of the funny part of people accusing me personally of because I didn't put the black square up, but I was calling for reparation prayers, that somehow I'm a racist. So I don't care about the loss of innocent life, yet abortion. And I've been very outspoken about how much I condemn abortion and Planned Parenthood. I've held petitions. I donate monetarily every month. I come on the podcast and give arguments.
But you don't have to defend yourself.
I know you don't.
Right?
It's so stupid though, because they don't. I come on the podcast and give
But
arguments.
you don't have to defend yourself.
I know you don't.
Right?
It's so stupid though, because they don't. And I guarantee a lot of the people who are saying, what about the Black lives, don't care about abortion either. And it is more likely in New York City for a Black baby to be aborted than it is to be born. Right. And that is a problem. Tell me that's not racist.
And that is a systemic, quantifiable. If you want to talk about systemic problems that we can quantify, we can look at the data. That's it, my friends. It's not the police. It's just not. Right? And there's one, I commend so highly the work of Thomas Sowell. He's a brilliant Black economist and sociologist. He was a former Marxist. He did the research, and he spends a lot of time talking about what results in these disparities. And his argument is you can't reduce it to any one thing. You can't reduce it to racism. You can't reduce it to slavery. Do those have some effects? Of course they do. But there's other perpetuating and deeper effects, which he argues now, which are ongoing policies happening right now. Many of them cultural, try to break down the family unit that promotes, again, broken homes, fatherlessness, all these. So get 2 books by Thomas Sowell, Black Rednecks and White Liberals, great book, and Discrimination and Disparities. If you really want to try and figure out, well, what are the deeper issues here, rather than just shrieking online. And I'm not accusing your listeners of that. This is obvious. People who attack you obviously aren't your listeners, right?
Oh, that's the funny thing, though. I don't know. Somebody must have shared it several people. I mean, actually, a lot of people shared. I had a lot of shares on that post, and I'm sure some people were sharing. It's like, can you believe what she's doing?
They send them off.
Yeah, they send them off.
Point and streak and send them off.
Yeah, so I had a lot of people who don't follow me, never heard of me, don't see all the work that I do previously. So these are not the listeners. Anybody, whoever's still listening, thank you. I love you. And we're not talking to you. We're talking to the you out there, the mob you.
Yeah. And if that is you out there, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should be deeply ashamed.
Listening. Thank you. I love you. And we're not talking to you. We're talking to the you out there, the mob you.
Yeah. And if that is you out there, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should be deeply ashamed of yourself for this type of behavior. It's stupid. It's childish. It's barbaric. It's immoral. It's promoting lies, right? This is not the moral life. This is not the good life. This is not dignified. This is shameful behavior. You trying to shame people over something like this is itself extremely shameful. There was another point I wanted to bring up. I was talking about Thomas Sowell. It's escaped me now. Oh, yeah. You don't have to defend yourself, right? If somebody's going to make an argument from silence, as what about an ad hominem, call you a racist, a bigot, a homophobe, a homophone, a xylophone, whatever these utterly meaningless terms are, it's so simple. Like, prove to me you're not an idiot. Prove to me you're not. No, I don't have to do that. You're going to make a gross, moral claim against my character. That burden is on you, my friend. I'm under no obligation to prove to you that. Do not try and engage them on their level. You need to make fun of them. You need to mock them, and you need to dismiss them, because these people are not susceptible to reason. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. They're in a frenzy. They are in a mob. So if you make arguments, understand that it's going to do nothing, but it might encourage and inspire people who are looking in. So that's why I did that, because there are sane onlookers, and it's good for sane onlookers to see that they're not alone in what seems like an otherwise insane world. But otherwise, you need to understand that these are bullies, and that bullies need to be treated like bullies. That you need to stand up for yourself. You need to push back. Don't think that you need to respond to their demands, to their McCarthyist, Stalinist demands to prove that you're a member of the party. It's nuts. It's nutso.
So.
Yes.
You're talking, okay, can we, did you have any?
Yes.
You're talking, okay, can we, did you have any other, so I think this is very interesting, because we're not asking you to take our word on any of this. I'll put up all the links. You do the research. You come to your own logical conclusions. Now, I'm biased, but I think you're going to agree with us because they are the logical conclusions.
And it's one of those things, like every Catholic, if there really were, reason to believe that there was ongoing, structural active racism right now, we are obligated to fight it wherever it is. And I think there are structural inequality. I don't want to use the term racism. That was the point, right? So the way that racism is used is really just kind of talking about any structural inequalities, or the term privilege, right? Or if somebody, first off, there's some red flags, right? If somebody uses the term privilege or problematic, or if they use like any two of those terms in like the same sentence, you're in for it, right? You're in for a treat. Privilege privilege used to be something. There's always a shifting of terms. You're in for it, right? You're in for a treat. Privilege used to be something. There's always a shifting of terms. Privilege used to be something that was conferred to an individual group by states or corporations that gave them a sort of temporary restricted benefit. Right? So affirmative action is a legitimate privilege, right? Where you have a benefit or a leg up given to you by the state or some type of corporation that other people don't have. But now privilege has just become unearned benefits. That's what but everybody has unearned benefits in everything. In fact, if you are an African American born in a middle class household with both of your parents, you have enormous unearned benefits, and you have privilege of affirmative action. So that's another conversation. We'll deal with that another time. But going back to racism, again, it could be the case that maybe no cops or very few cops are individually racist, but right of unfairly or unjustly targeting minority communities. But we don't see that. We don't even see that, right? But the charge is that not only is there massive structural effect, but again, when you fix for crime, which is critical, you have to always look to see if it's fixed for crime. You not only don't see that, but people are claiming that the cops themselves are actually individually racist in some massive scale or massive degree. And that's a horrific lie, and it should concern Catholics because we saw something quite similar and still similar with priests. Right? That yes, we actually had a much bigger issue with police and pedophilia. It was still statistically a minority. Still statistically,
you said police and pedophilia.
Oh, I'm sorry, priests. Right?
Yep.
Now, we know that it's not just limited to priests. Right? Anybody who paid attention and looked up the relevant facts realized that there's huge issues with pedophilia in school teachers. In religious and authority positions everywhere, right? It's just and authority positions everywhere, right? It's just there's just a huge issue with pedophilia. But why did the Catholic priests get called out? That's an interesting thing. Why is it that it's police and priests who will get called out and condemned universally for any sins they commit? But you don't hear it about public school teachers. We know pedophilia and abuse is exceedingly rampant in public school teachers. My high school principal, who was a teacher of 2 of my classes just last year, got arrested at the Milwaukee airport. You can check him out. I guess I could say his name. It was public news. His name's David Hay. Was involved in a gay child sex smuggling ring. This man was my principal, he was my teacher, and he was a cool dude that everybody liked. And then he goes off to Harvard, and then he starts working in the Board of Education. And where was the outrage of this? Why not defund public teachers? Right? Most people can understand, well, that's not all teachers, or that's not even close to all teachers. Why is it that we get this with priests and police officers? And somebody, a friend of mine, had an interesting hypothesis. And the hypothesis was that they're in positions of clear authority.
Yeah.
And these people just hate that authority. So it's not even about the injustices themselves. It's about overthrowing a political structure. And that's
we see the Black Lives Matter movement. The leaders were just on the news saying they want to burn down the structures of the United States. They want to destroy our country. They're trying to overthrow the authority that's currently in place.
Right. And the kind of retreat tactic there is to say, well, look, it's decentralized. This is everyone. I can admit that. It's fine. But guess what? The central organization and their avowed statements and their leadership admitting they're trained Marxists is more than enough for me that I'm not going to lend any credence to this. I know that I have nothing to prove virtue-wise. I know that I will gladly stand side by side against any injustice in this world, racial or otherwise, but I'm not going to lend my support, my vocal support, my platform support, or my financial support stands for and is promoting itself radical injustices through society, and no Catholic should, no matter how much you get shrieked at online.
Amen, hallelujah. Now, speaking of getting shrieked at online, we said we were going to give some practical tips for dealing with this.
Yes.
How can we get into that? Or
yes.
did you have more stuff that you wanted to say?
So say you commit the heinous sin of stepping out of the rhetorical narrative, right? Online.
Asking for prayers.
even among Catholics. Oh, I forgot to mention my little bit of research, because when you get into it online, you always click somebody's profile. You say, well, I want to see what the idiot looks like, right? And I should be more charitable.
Well, yeah.
But, for the vast majority of the time, not all, but the vast majority of the time, you go to their profiles, and it's so funny because on your thread, they're always talking about, well, you're supposed to be Catholic, and they're trying to do all these manipulative ploys. What would Jesus do? But on their profiles, the thing, you almost never see that they're Catholic. They almost never posted they're Catholic, but at least half of them had the pride symbol up. They'll even admit that they're Catholic when it becomes, again, politically convenient to do so. And their real religion is a political ideology. It's not the Catholic faith. It's not the Catholic truth. So just understand that. And of course, that didn't surprise me, but it confirmed many of my suspicions when I did that. When I did that little bit of research, it was
one person who called me out. I did my little bit of research, and she just said a lot of her posts were talking about how much she just is having a hard time praying for anything but God's wrath to destroy anybody involved in any of this. I was like, woo. That is not charitable at all. But then I got accused of not being Catholic.
And so not only that, but in the profiles I went through, I saw nothing against, again, abortion or euthanasia or child.
It's more love is love.
But I would never say go and attack them and be like, look, I just went through 8 years of your Instagram posts and I didn't see a single thing on abortion. You must be a pro-abortee or something like that, right? No, how much pathetic loser do you have to be to go troll through somebody's Instagram post and think that you can infer everything about somebody's character from their social media page? Give me a break. So yes, how do you deal with this? Well, the first thing you deal with is you have the right expectations. You just understand everything that I just said, that we're dealing with a largely irrational mob that makes themselves feel good by trying to bully and belittle others. It's middle school. If you just think back to middle school, most of this will make perfect sense,
yeah,
right?
But also, this is horribly painful. Bullying sucks. Yeah, and I got to tell you, the other day when all this was happening, I am so grateful that I knew all the facts, and I had Pat. You were my champion and not my knight in shining armor to help me deal with the public comments while I dealt with the private messages of hate. And I had a couple of other friends to do that. And then I had a couple of messages from people saying, "You're so brave. I wish I could do this." With the public comments while I dealt with the private messages of hate. And I had a couple of other friends to do that. And then I had a couple of messages from people saying, "You're so brave. I wish I could do this. You just let it roll off your back." It was emotionally exhausting to deal with any of this stuff. Bullying is emotionally exhausting to deal with. So if you wind up, and I know we'll go back to what Pat was saying. If you wind up in a position where you are being bullied or mobbed, it's okay to suffer from this. And what I did is I went for a nice long walk. I prayed a rosary, prayed the Divine Mercy Chaplet. I cried a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I was very upset. But also it's been a long week because I had a teething baby.
Let your husband take care of that.
Let my husband.
I'm fine. I've been called names online since I was 14 years old.
I know. It doesn't mean
anything.
Yeah. So I want to say this. I'm not naturally a person like Pat. You're naturally like this. I don't know if you love it, but you're.
Let me say this. I find it extremely frustrating and annoying because I'd rather be doing my research papers and writing.
Comments from people saying, "I wish I could do that. I'm just so scared." Well, here, use what we're talking about, but also realize that it's okay to be scared. And I got to tell you, I feel better coming through this now because you know what I didn't do? I didn't despair. I asked God for help.
Yep.
I prayed to the saints. And you know what I thought what came to mind is I was like, well, a little online bullying compared to an early church martyr being thrown to the lions. I got it good.
Or Saint Theodosia, who fought against the iconoclasm, who had a ram's horn pounded through her neck.
Yeah, that's another thing. We've gotten a couple of good Catholic saints for people who stood up against the desecration of sacred icons. And then I also realized that even if you don't feel like you're naturally good at this, Moses wasn't either. Moses, he had a stutter, I'm pretty sure. I think this is what they infer. That he had a stutter. He wasn't a good public speaker. He didn't know that he was up to the task. And yet God gave him the tools that he needed to do that. He gave him Aaron to help him. He gave him his sister Miriam. He gave him an ability to speak well to others. So even if you don't naturally feel like you're able to do this, God will give you the graces if you ask. And even if you still fail in some ways, God's grace also helps. And that suffering will help as well. So either way, no matter what angle you come from, if you're naturally good at this, if you're not, if you're sensitive, if you have thicker skin naturally, good things can come from this. You should, even if it's tough, and because it's tough, you should still do it.
Yes. Okay.
Right,
so battle strategy. 1, be right. Be correct. Right. So, do your research, understand what is true, what is not.
Which means don't post in the heat of the moment.
Right.
I've done this, and you've helped me tremendously in saying, cool down, take a breath, take a little while, come back to it, because I'll angrily jot something down. You're like, whoa.
Yep. So we talk about picking your battles. So you do need to pick some battles, but you need to pick battles. Where no, I'm correct on this. I am right on this, and that's why you see in this whole episode, I was very clear on what my position is, and I have the position. I'm correct on this. I am right on this, and that's why you see in this whole episode, I was very clear on what my position is, and I have the positions to back it up. I do.
Right, because I will say somebody posted something recently on Instagram accusing X of doing Y and saying, I'm shaking as I'm writing this. Well, this person was wrong and also shaking. I mean, there's a lot of emotion. Don't post in an emotional state. So
you need to be right. You need to be grounded in the truth. Don't just make, provocative political claims just for the sake of doing that. You don't want to do that because then other people won't take you seriously. And when people see somebody getting mobbed, they typically do want to root for the underdog, but they especially want to root for the underdog if they know the underdog is standing firm in the truth. So that's something that's overlooked. You need to be right. And this, everything I said is right. It's correct, right? These are the reasons why Catholics should stand against the Black Lives Matter organization. Of course, should condemn any individual acts. Should work to fight injustices, but should also do the work of figuring out, well, what is causing these structural injustices really? And let's have that conversation and be willing to have those conversations. So one, be right. Number two, once you have your position, be willing to proclaim it, absolutely. And then here's where it's important, right? Because then once the shrieking comes, once the mob comes, very important. One, you never apologize. What these people want is not, they don't want repentance, not really, right? What they want is a public example and cancellation. That's what they want. They want to make a public example of you. There's no forgiveness on that. That's the funny thing about this ideology. It has like all the kind of caricatures that people of a certain type try to put on religion. It has all those characters, but none of the good elements of religion. So there's just burning witches, but no forgiveness, right? So they don't want you to apologize. They make it seem like they want you to apologize, but what they really want is a cancellation, right? So what they would have loved for you was for you to say, you guys are right, I should have thought about this. Of course they're not. They're fools. And then for you to cancel the novena. That's what they wanted, right? Didn't do it. They didn't get it. So you never apologize. You never back down. All right, those are things.
Which is why it's important that you're right.
Right.
Yeah, you don't. If you're wrong, you should apologize.
Right.
If you're truly wrong, so that's why it's so important to do that first point. Do your homework first.
Yes. Yeah, because you can't lie. As Catholics, you can't lie. So if you put a lie out and or even if you put something that's wrong out, then you are obligated to correct your position. Right. So make sure that your position is correct. Okay. So you never apologize. You never back down, and then you understand that it's okay to block people, right? It's okay to purge your social media account, to create barriers between people who are trying to defame your character, who are trying to attack you publicly from all different angles and from all different fronts. There's no reason that you need to tolerate any of that. You can block them, you can ban them, whatever you need to do. You do not need to entertain their nonsense. Now, I think it is worth throwing some counterpunches and making sure that you offer some arguments if you're in the spirit of doing so, just so people can see. Because remember, in a lot of these debacles, there's always third parties looking in, right? Mm-hmm. So you understand, you set the right expectations that these people aren't here to reason. They're not here to have a productive dialogue. They're here to shame. They're here to get a public example and to get a cancellation. But you make the arguments and you stand firm for everybody else, all the same people who are looking in, to inspire them, right? Because we need them speaking out. And look, you can't just stay hidden from this, because these are the types of people that at some point, we're already at that point, right? If you're quiet, they're mad at you. At some point, we're already at that point, right? If you're quiet, they're mad at you. If they're quiet, it's not what you say. It's now what you're not saying on social media. They're gonna get you no matter what at some point. So you're gonna have to make a call of to get off the fence sooner rather than later. So those are the big things, right? Be right, never apologize, never back down, and understand it will pass, right? Once they realize that they're not going to get what they want, once they understand that they're not getting the example or the cancellation, and especially if you hit them back and they realize that they're against somebody who might even be bigger or smarter than them, like any bullies, they're going to go away. Yep. And that's exactly what happened in your case. And I told you they would. I told you that they would eventually recede.
They did, and it took about a day.
Yep.
Or I would say a full 24 hours, because I posted it in the evening, and it went through. The bulk of it was the following afternoon, and then it stopped. And I've gotten, I think somebody else posted something, but it's very minor.
Right. Yeah. So they'll go away.
But it's very minor.
Right. Yeah. So they'll go away. Right. They're only gonna like true bullies. They're only gonna pick on those they think that they can successfully pick on.
Right.
And
it's funny. I learned that years ago with you, because you got picked on for talking about a certain exercise. It was called a man maker.
Right.
It's just the name of the exercise. And you had a few people come out at you online saying this is unjust. It should be a different name.
That's right.
It's not like you named the exercise.
And I told them to pack it and ship off.
I know they after a couple hours they were gone.
Yep.
Never to be heard or seen from again. Except somebody else. They went off to somebody else.
Now here's the other thing that's important: is if you have your own crew, you bring the crew in. Bullies like to isolate, so they want to make you feel like you're alone.
Oh, doesn't that sound like the devil?
It does. Right? They want to make you feel like you're alone, and they always attack in mob. Right? So you standing up for yourself is one thing, but if you've got other friends, bring them into the fray. Call in backup. right? So it wasn't just me who came to your defense. It was a couple other people all and get in on this. So yeah, if you've got backup, call it in. If you don't have backup, organize your backup. So that way when this happens, you can have people who are going to step up and push this mob back. And then we need to do this. These are the cultural battles. If you don't push the mob back, the mob's going to succeed. And this is not just a social media thing, right? If anybody studied the French Revolution or any reign of terror like it, any Marxist communist reign of terror like it, like we are in the midst of the initial flowering of that, right? We're past the seedings. Like so this is real stuff. This is serious stuff, and these people need to.
Even if the bullying happens, say mostly on social media, the consequences are in real life.
Right.
Because if these loud minority, the screeching minority, gets their power and gets their way, we're in a heap of trouble.
Right.
So this needs to be. I mean, we heard it. Our Lady at Fatima warned us against this. She said, "Pray." Even if people tell you you're praying incorrectly. But you have to, as Catholics, like Pat said, we are committed to justice. We heard it. Our Lady at Fatima warned us against this. She said, pray, even if people tell you you're praying incorrectly. But you have to, as Catholics, like Pat said, we are committed to justice. And you can't just be a silent spectator nodding your head quietly or sending private messages. But I appreciate those messages, that it means a lot, because it shows me that I'm not isolated, even though these people would like to tell me that I am and that I'm part of the problem. But find your backup, find what battles you're going to fight, and fight them.
Right. And not only that, but we're not the other side. And we understand that all persons are deserving of dignity and respect, but not all ideas are. And these people are in the grips of an insane ideology, but they're still people. And I've used some interesting words. I stand by almost all of them. Understand that I'm emotional about this as well, but you always let reason guide your emotion, never the other way around. That's the problem with the other side. They're letting emotion overrule reason. Say is, if somebody does, on the other side, apologize and it's sincere, you accept it and you forgive them, and you re-embrace them fully. Right, we're not the other side. They don't really care about the apology. They want the example and the cancellation.
Show them
we want conversion. Right, we want productive dialogue. We want to talk with people about structural injustices, about the poor. We want to talk about these issues and figure out real solutions to it. We do, of course, we do. Of crime rates and disparities. Not all disparities are unjust, as Thomas Sowell explains in his excellent book, but the ones that really are, like abortion and stuff like that. We do want to talk about this. We want to have meaningful, productive dialogue. So just always remember that it's the ideology that's evil and vicious, and that people can be gripped by that, but they're still people. Sometimes they do deserve, to be mocked in the moment, but you still recognize that these are people made in the image and likeness of God, and that hopefully through prayer and a lot of patience and standing firm, some of them will, wake. I hate to use the term "wake up" because everyone's talking about being woke now, but wake up from this and realize, wow, I have not been seeing clearly. I have not been thinking straight. That's what we want. We want people to come back in full line with Catholic teaching, with the Catholic Church. Lean into the Church. Understand that the Church gives us that moral clarity. The Church is there to give us the grace, the moral blueprint, the moral structure, the ethical blueprint. And we have to make sure that that's first, that we're Catholics first. As soon as you let politics become your primary religion, this is what you see, right? Mm-hmm.
It's problematic.
It's.
I know you hate that word.
It is. Anyway, so that's. Well, there's the Pat Flynn side of things. Anyway, so that's. Well, there's the Pat Flynn side of things.
The right side. I think you make a really good point that, and you said this before, that these are otherwise sincere people. Like, they do care about problems. They're just so misguided on what the actual problem is and the best way to go about addressing it.
Well, that's part of the problem, is that people who are Marxists, anybody who's ever studied Marxism or neo-Marxism or postmodernism or deconstructivism, there's a great divide between the people who are the intellectuals behind this, who know what they're doing.
Oh, they absolutely do.
They know what they're doing, right? They want to tear down these structures. They want to tear down. That's what deconstructivism is, right? So on the intellectual side, the people who kind of trickle this down from academia, they know what they're doing, and they know that part of the best way to do it is to hijack the good intentions of otherwise sincere people. So certainly I do not believe many or even most of these people who are out there acting like fools and hooligans are doing so because they intentionally are trying to push through a radical Marxist agenda. Not at all. But as Mark Twain said, it is much easier to be fooled than to be convinced that you've been fooled. And he's right.
Yep.
He's absolutely right.
Yeah. I was going to say something else. I think that's a great ending. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I will put all of the resources that Pat has mentioned in
studies,
in the studies that are all there in the show notes so that you can do the research yourself. And
let me say this, right? Because there's going to be a lot of people listening to this. I know, because we got the stats. This is great. Catholic Mama's growing. A lot of listeners. You know what we're talking about. You've dealt with this. And you probably want to fight against this insanity. So please share it with whoever you think could hear it, if you think they're open to a reasonable dialogue on this. And please help us grow the podcast by leaving those positive reviews on iTunes or Stitcher, right? It's kind of cheeky, but the 5-star reviews really do help with the show in the ranking. So even if you're not in the fray on social media, that's at least something that you could do to try and break up this mob mentality.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. And I mean, mostly I started the Catholic Mama to help people become more confident in their Catholic faith so that they could raise children who are confidently Catholic as well. Now, unfortunately, I also do have to talk about contemporary issues from time to time, such as this. We will get back to the traditional teachings of the faith on other episodes. So share this, even if it's, share this episode specifically because it's so appropriate for our time right now. But also remember that we have so many. I think this is going to be episode 127. Lots to dive deeper into the Catholic faith with this podcast. I've been doing it for 2 years now this month. Isn't that wonderful? 2 years.
It's wonderful.
And it has grown. I'm almost at 100,000 downloads. So this is awesome. Right. All right. So thank you everyone who listened. Thank you, Pat. I really do. I said something on, is it Parlay? I don't even know. That's a new, it's social like a Twitter, media. Facebook mashup.
Yeah.
Without the censorship.
Yep.
That you are the intellectual heavyweight and you help even the naturally inclined featherweights like myself and all this philosophy understand all of this. So thank you. I very much appreciate it.
We all have our obligation to do whatever part.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.